Sorry about that. We're facing technical difficulties. I think we have Daoud Shaima now. So we're just facing technical difficulties with Nanette. Once she's in, we can actually start. Thank you for your patience, guys.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, Daoud. How are you?
Hi, finally. My God.
Yeah,
Why is it so complicated?
Yeah.
Do you want perpendicular or horizontal? Like this?
Wayne, could you take over and confirm with Mr. Kuttab? Fine.
Yes, I was trying to get a hold of the other person. Yes, I'm hearing you loud and clear.
You prefer horizontal or vertical?
Oh, no, that is fine. Yeah, that is fine.
Horizontal. Okay.
Yeah, that is fine.
I don't hear we haven't started yet, I assume.
No, we haven't started yet. No.
Okay. Is it live or is it recorded?
It's being recorded.
Okay.
Daoud, this is Eetta. I was very sorry to read on Facebook about your brother-in-law, and
it's a sad story. Yeah,
please accept our condolences.
Thank you. Thank you.
البقاء لله أستاذ داوود.
شكرا تسلم إليك حبيبتي. Thank you.
أيوة.
Okay, apologies everyone. We're having some technical difficulties. Once we're ready, we will start. But we are also now live on UNWeb TV.
Oh, okay.
So just we'll start in a few minutes. Apologies for our audience tuning in.
Okay.
Apologies, everyone, one more time. We're facing technical difficulties to sign in the moderator of the panel discussion. Thank you again for your patience, and please bear with us for a minute or two.
I said I might have to leave early because I have another appointment. So I hope we're not that late.
Understood. Sorry about that one more time.
It's okay.
There are technical difficulties, so.
Yeah.
We, of course, as the organizer, had some technical glitches, so I really apologize. I saw that Daoud, you also had problems to log in.
Yeah, but I'm in now, thank God.
You beat me to it, and you beat us to it. Again, my apologies. Conversation, and I wait for the greetings, everyone. I would like to welcome everyone to the second day of the United Nations International Media Seminar on Peace in the Middle East. Today, we will discuss solutions journalism in the coverage of the Israel-Palestine conflict. And we all know, of course, that it is the role of the media to bring us the news. And more often than not, that means bad news. But it can be equally, if not more important, to focus on solutions to the challenges reported on. Research has shown that people get despondent when confronted with a barrage of bad news and simply tune out. The audiences want to see examples of how problems can be overcome and the impact this may have on their lives. And that is the core of solutions journalism. Solutions journalism strives to inspire audiences, which may lead to positive change in public opinion, in behavior, and possibly also in policies. And it can open the door for constructive debate, something that is much needed in particular when it comes to long-standing issues such as the Israel-Palestine conflict. Today, we will try to explore how solutions journalism can be practiced and possibly even thrive in the context of that conflict. And we are very happy to have with us three impressive speakers who I'm very honored to introduce now. We have Dina Aboughazala. She is a media entrepreneur and journalist who worked for the BBC before launching her media startup Egab last year, the platform that specializes in solutions journalism. During her years at the BBC, Ms. Aboughazala covered political, social, and economic issues along with cultural and media developments in the Middle East and North Africa. And in addition to her journalistic work, she provides training on solutions journalism as well as on diversity and inclusion in the media. A warm welcome to you, Dina, and thanks for joining us. We also have with us today Daoud Kuttab, a veteran journalist and media activist with more than 40 years of experience. Mr. Kuttab is the Director General of Community Media Network, which administers Radio Al-Balad in Amman and ammannet.net. He is also the former Ferris Professor of Journalism at Princeton University and former Deputy Chair of the International Press Institute. His op-ed columns have appeared in the Los Angeles Times, in Foreign Policy, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and others. And he has received a number of international awards, including the Freedom of Expression Award from the Committee to Protect Journalists. Welcome, Daoud Kuttab.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we have Eetta Prince-Gibson, an award-winning journalist and lecturer on Israeli society and politics, including Jerusalem and gender issues in Israel and the Middle East conflict, and also on the role of media in conflict resolution and refugee and minority rights. Ms. Prince-Gibson is currently the Israel editor for Moment magazine and a regular contributor to Haaretz, Al Monitor, and Foreign Policy, amongst others. She is the recipient of a Clarion Award for Women's Writing in 2015 and a National Religion Newswriters Association First Place Award, also in 2015. Eetta Prince-Gibson was the editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Report for 5 years, and prior to that, she was a correspondent for the Washington Post from 1993 to 2001, and we are so happy to have you with us, Eetta Prince-Gibson. Thank you for joining us. And I would like to start the conversation by asking all of you this. What impact can solutions journalism have on a complex and long-standing issue such as the Israel-Palestine conflict? And I would like each of our panelists to respond to this first question for about 5 minutes. And I would like to start with you, Mr. Kuttab. Could you give us some thoughts on that?
Well, I think the Palestine-Israel conflict is a great way to try to experiment on the solutions journalism format. The problem is that we all have been trained to go, as you said in the introduction, for bad news. And I disagree that the public doesn't want bad news. They love bad news because that's what brings the ratings up. That's why most media continue to publish bad news. What I like about solutions journalism that is different than some of the new ideas that have been coming, peace journalism and other types of journalism, is that it doesn't go away from the basic fundamentals of journalism, which is it seeks after the truth. Now, once you seek after the truth in solutions journalism, then the idea of solution journalism is it takes you one step further. You can tell the worst story, the best story, the most difficult story in your introduction, but you have to conclude with the solutions, and it's plural, not singular. In other words, you cannot say the only solution is X. You have to give other options. And if you're doing solutions journalism correctly, you have to give the audience a survey of what each of the solutions that you're suggesting cost. Economically, politically, financially, culturally, all these issues come into practice when you're deciding what solution journalism is. And for the Arab-Israeli conflict, the Palestinian conflict, we'd love to have much more people writing in the format of solution journalism, because it forces all of us to think outside of the box, to think, okay, what's the solution? You cannot keep talking about problems in Al-Aqsa Mosque or problems in Gaza or problems in wherever without telling your audience, okay, this is the problem and these are the various solutions that exist. One requires a political will, one requires financial support, one requires a mix of both of these things. But you have to tell the audience the solutions that are available and where each country or each people or each side stands on these solutions. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think it can work very well for the Palestinian-Israeli conflict.
Thank you. And just if I may follow up there, Daoud, I mean, can you give an example maybe of where you've seen the impact of that kind of storytelling in your career?
I haven't seen a lot of solutions journalism on the Palestine-Israel conflict. I have to be honest. We have two narratives that are so far-fetched that we cannot really bring them together. I've tried a few things. For example, for the last 5 years, there is a man sitting in an Israeli jail named Mohammed al-Halabi. He used to work for World Vision, and the Israelis decided one day that he has diverted $50 million worth of money that is supposed to go for humanitarian aid to what they call terrorist organizations. Well, the court didn't really come up with any results. There was no evidence. And I tried to come up with an idea. And so one of the ideas I came up with is I pretended to have an interview with the Israeli prosecutor. And I asked him, obviously they will not give me an interview. So I came up with what I thought the Israeli prosecutor would say. I mean, based on what was going on in the court and what we know from the public record. And I created a narrative, a question and answer. Now, if you're reading it and you're very open-minded, you'll realize who's telling the truth and who's not. I didn't take positions. I tried to give the audience the chance to make the position, but I tried to pretend to be both the journalist and the prosecutor based on what the prosecutor said in the court. And basically, I debunked all the things that he said in the court, but in a clever journalistic way. I mean, I don't know if that's solution journalism, but at least I tried to give both points of view, even though I was unable to get a direct interview, which I would have liked.
Yes, thank you, Daoud. It's certainly an unorthodox approach.
Exactly.
Eetta, I would like to ask you maybe next to on really the question. I mean, in the context of this conflict, what impact can solutions journalism have, and maybe also can you give us an example from your own work and career?
I think it would be, I am not familiar with solutions journalism being applied to a conflict in this way. And Dina, you probably have more experience than I. If I take, though, the example, the concept, I think it would have a tremendous impact for several reasons. The idea of solutions journalism is that we take a problem that was dealt with somewhere else, and we say, what could what can we learn from this? And as Daoud said, we also relate to what do we gain? What do we lose? What did it cost? We can also look at what failed and why, although I think that's different. And that's certainly different than Daoud, as you said. We often say in journalism, if it bleeds, it leads. You know, if it's awful, let's write about it. I'm not sure what readers want anymore. I know that there's compassion fatigue. I know how much, you know, how much we might want to try to look at and say things are, at least on some level, solvable. I think the greatest impact, though, that it could have on the conflict, and again, I haven't been able to suggest specifically how we would adapt it, as opposed to what it could do in each society separately, which is tremendous. But if one thing that we could do is say, people have faced conflicts in the world. I think each conflict, certainly in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, we have a tendency to think that we're the only ones. Nobody ever faced a conflict like ours. Any other examples aren't relevant because, well, in Belfast, they're all Christians, or here it was language, and there it was, you know, they're fighting for different things. Whereas one thing that I think would be really important to pull us out of the stagnation of we have nothing to learn from anyone else because our situation is so much worse than everybody else's, or because it's so different and unique. I think everybody thinks their conflict is unique. Well, I think that people have probably faced similar issues in the past and certainly currently. I think that with something else that would be really important to do is it would make us define problems and in very specific terms. In other words, we talk a lot about, as opposed to using terms like, you know, the conflict or terror or the occupation, all of which are, we need to break them down. I don't mean to be simplistic, but I'm not quite sure how to solve the occupation because it's made up of components. To actually do solutions journalism, we would have to break that down into problems and articulate them, which in and of itself would already be a really important thing to do, if only for the journalists themselves. So as opposed to, you know, conflict, we might talk about, for instance, the Haram al-Sharif, the Temple Mount, as what do you do when you have has anybody faced in the world a space that is claimed and denied by conflicting religions? That's a very different statement than we have a problem. You know, what are we going to do? I can't look at, no, there is no other Haram al-Sharif or Temple Mount. But I'm sure in the world, there have been places that have faced religious groups that are in conflict anyway, claiming mutually exclusive space in a way that there is no narrative that, as Daoud said, that meets, because you can't have, what do we do with that? That to me is something that would be really important to, even as an exercise, to completely break down the buzzwords that we use, which I'm sorry to say become buzzwords. I don't even know what half of them mean anymore, to be honest. To specifics that may or may not be solvable, but at least it's specifics. It's like we all know, you know, when you feel overwhelmed with a large task, break it down into its components. All of us learned that in time management and in everything else. I think that would be a tremendous contribution to all of us and to our thinking. I've not seen it done, but I know that it would be important to do.
And that is then maybe something and an impetus that can come out of this conversation, out of this seminar. So this is really a very, very, very interesting thought. I mean, really break it down, break the conflict down to its components, go beyond the buzzwords, maybe also the contentious buzzwords that have certainly by now occupy very special meanings, you know, for the different sides, and also look across the world at conflicts and see if there are if you want, almost lessons to be learned, or if there are commonalities that one can draw on. So certainly a very, very interesting thought here. Thank you so much, Eetta, for that. And Dina, with that, I want to go to you. I mean, and I think somebody's, maybe if anybody who's not speaking, if we could mute our mics.
There's a background.
That might help. Yeah, Dina, your platform focuses specifically on solutions journalism, and maybe also what are your thoughts really on the impact solutions journalism can have in the context of the situation of the Israeli-Palestine conflict. So please, and also after the thoughts of both Daoud and Eetta already on this.
Sure. I want to start by just providing a definition and a very brief explanation of solution journalism for the audience, because they might have not heard of it before. So just very briefly, solution journalism is rigorous evidence-based reporting of responses to social problems. So we aim to cover how societies are responding to the problems that they face. And there are 4 pillars for solution journalism to make sure that it's objective and, as we said, rigorous evidence-based reporting. There has to be a response that has already been implemented, because as a journalist, your job is to report things. Of course, you can write opinion pieces, but then this would be an opinion piece. But if for speaking about solution journalism, then there has to be a response that has actually been implemented on the ground. And then you have to look at the evidence. This is the second pillar. And it's the evidence, this what guarantees that this is proper journalism, not just, propaganda or an opinion piece. And the evidence, by the way, could show either that the response is working or not working, because sometimes people think that you can't do a solution journalism piece on a response that hasn't worked. Actually, you can, and we should, because there are lessons learned from previous attempts that have failed, because this would provide very valuable lessons for others when they try, to go and give it a try to solve their problems. And the third thing, which is also very important, is our insights. We really need to understand, why did it work? How it worked? What made it? Is it just limited to that community, or it could be, or that solution could travel? Or what should we adapt when we try to take that solution? If there's a solution in Tunisia, could it work in Egypt, and so forth? And the last thing, which I think is really, really important. I mean, the 4 pillars are important. I keep saying this for every pillar, but I think this one is crucial, because I've seen many pieces that claim to be solution journalism, and they always lack that 4th one, which is the limitations. So every solution has a limitation. There's nothing called like a perfect solution. We're not speaking here of magical solutions and all these buzzwords that Eetta perhaps was, referring to in a different context, but exactly, we should steer clear of such words. So once you've done this, the perfect formula, once you have these 4 components in your piece, you can rest assured that you have a proper piece of journalism. So I just wanted to get this out of the way before I give my answer. As when it comes to the impact, I think I agree with both speakers and the different ideas they proposed. And for me, I think there are 2 levels for how solution journalism could be very useful when it comes to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. First, there is this at the level of the conflict itself. And exactly like Eetta said, you can look at how previous conflicts were solved. Okay, what we can learn from the experiences of other nations. Is there a lesson that we can learn from South Africa? Is there a lesson we can learn from X or Y or Z? And then we can see, okay, why did that work in that community and what's different, and apply to that. So there is a very valuable, reason for why we should do this. Also, not just looking at other conflicts, which is very valid, but also looking at this conflict. I mean, it's been 20 years, I think, right, since the 2-state solution path have been, launched. And I think there's always this discussion among the solution journalism practitioners. It is when to start reporting on a solution, because you need to have enough time to be able to assess the evidence, right? And I would agree, and I hope the panelists would agree, that 20 years is enough time to start this response, because the 2-state solution was a response to a problem. So we need to see, this is the response, where is the evidence, where did it work, where didn't, and the insights, and what are the limitations, so that when we move forward, we can move forward on a solid ground, and also to inform and educate the public because every time the narrative seems to be the same every time, both sides. I think we need to break this narrative and bring new facts, and so that we have a more informed and a more constructive dialogue. The second level, so this is the macro level, at the conflict level. The second level, where I think it's really the solution journalism plays a huge role, is the level of the individuals, the level of societies, the level of introducing each side to the other. So I just want to leave you with, I'll give you one statistic. So I was, the Solution Journalism Network, which is based in the US, has a very valuable resource called the Solution Journalism Tracker, where they try to, gather the different solution journalism stories that have been published. Of course, it's not completely there might be other stories that's not there, but just if you search for solution journalism stories from Gaza, you'll find 3 stories. If you search for solution journalism stories from West Bank, you find 1 story. If you search for solution journalism stories from Israel, find 43 stories. Can you see the imbalance? What does this tell you? Why is that? I'm citing these data because this is part of the problem. Sometimes our coverage, because it's focused exactly as Daoud said on the bad, on the conflict, and as you said in your introduction. So we tend to reduce certain communities and societies and people to a certain image. Solution journalism allows us to see another side of these communities. And this is important because we need to know each other. One of the, I think, research, and it's been done in many experiments, is one of the things that really help with tackling polarization and hatred. And, and in these conflicts where you have 2 sides and both of them, are just very convinced that they are the right side, is that you try to help them meet each other, to introduce them to each other, because most of the time they haven't even met, or they have this stereotype. So the solution journalism can help break these stereotypes, can help you as journalists, our duty to present Palestinians in a way other than usually how they are usually portrayed in the media, and vice versa. So this is I think it's very important as journalists that it's very important for solution journalism to start to be applied more. And there are, as I said, there are stories of solution journalism, but they're not enough, and especially from the Palestinian side. And we hope that this would change.
Well, thank you so much, Dina. Thanks a lot, first of all, for really outlining, the framework of solutions journalism to us, and then also, saying that and applying that framework also, as you say, to highlight the issues in the Israel-Palestine conflict, basically to apply these principles to the reporting on the conflict. And what you also say, it can help break down stereotypes. It can help, lead to a greater understanding. I would like to say that we have a comment and an important alert to an excellent resource that has come in from the audience by Nibal Tawate, the director of media development of the Media Development Center at Birzeit University, who is alerting us to the fact that at Birzeit University, in cooperation with the French Development Agency, they are working on solutions journalism and held the first conference on solutions journalism 3 years ago, and also implemented projects in the West Bank and Gaza on solutions journalism, which brings me right away to the next question. I mean, all of you have already outlined, potential approaches. I mean, Eetta, you were speaking about look at other conflicts, break it down. What can we learn? Dina, you said let's apply the if you want the concept of which is rigorous of solutions journalism to the conflict. So what can we do to promote and advance this approach? If we feel that this is something that is helpful, that would help to break down the siloed narratives, if you want, and also the antagonistic narratives, what can we do to promote it? And it was great, Dina, to hear from you the statistics in the solutions journalism tracker by the network. I think even if there are 43 stories on Israel, and only 5, I think, on Gaza and 1 on the West Bank. Yes, there is an imbalance, but I would think even 43 stories are not an enormous amount. So the question to all of you really, how can we promote this approach that is in and by itself so promising? How can we promote it more? And Eetta, maybe I can start with you this time.
Well, I mean, I want to distinguish between 2 things here, because I think each society can do a lot for itself in terms of solutions journalism. And as you said, 43 stories. Dina, I don't know how well if they appeared on the site, then we know that Solutions Journalism Network approved them, thought they were worthwhile. But so much passes as, you know, you asked us about feel good in a later point. You know, so much of it is just descriptive of something good happened, as though that's a solution, and we're not able to take anything out of it. So my first thing would be that each society faces questions and issues and challenges and problems that are not necessarily relevant to the other society. So a lot of very good training on both sides, because the stronger our societies are socially and socioeconomically and politically, but certainly the stronger they are socially, the easier a solution when we're ready to do that will be, because we'll be dealing with entities that are stronger, less given, I can speak from my experience on the Israeli side, less given to populism, less given to fear-mongering, because we're stronger, and we would be stronger, and we would think in terms of solutions. Vis-a-vis the conflict, I think there's tremendous things we could do, but I have to put in a caveat here. That would require, of course, working together, if only to define the problem that we're looking at. That's number 1. And number 2 is, as I said, we would have to break down large topics into specifics and look at them, because I don't know. I mean, what are we going to look at? How another country solved the occupation, or solved, you know, terror, or whatever we want to call it? I don't know that that's meaningful. Because even all issues are made up, in my opinion, if we look at it also from an inclusive security point of view, they're made up of the issues that people face, not of buzzwords. And to that effort of working together to articulate, it would be fascinating to articulate even, I'm going to, before I move on, I'm sure that even the articulation would be an important exercise for Palestinians and Israelis, because even in the same space, we may not see the same problem. We may see it differently. How do we solve a problem if we don't know what the problem is, in the sense that we haven't articulated it? So even on that level, it becomes a very important tool. Having said that, though, let's not ignore that there is objection to this kind of work, this kind of cooperation. We are in and on 2 levels. First of all, there's objection to any kind of cooperation, from the boycott movement that says, no, we can't do, you should not be doing that. And that comes, there's some of that on the Israeli side as well. I don't want to, just because BDS, of course, relates to the Palestinian community, I don't want to say that there aren't Israelis who say the same thing, because there are. Cooperation, working together, is bad, because until the occupation is resolved, what are we doing? Making it look good? And I don't have to go into all of this. I find that problematic, in the sense that I'd like to sit and think, what do we think the problem is? Again, not obviously the problem is control. If I think in terms of Jerusalem, control and everything that comes with it, with occupation. But I want to break that down. How do we travel within the city? How do we, you know, again, where do you need to go if you're a Palestinian Jerusalemite within the city that you don't get to? Where do I need to go as an Israeli Jewish resident that I don't get to go to? There's also going to be objection to breaking down problems, because one is, it requires a whole lot of responsibility. Dina, as you talked about, I mean, these 4 pillars requires all of us to be the best journalists that we can be. On another level, again, breaking something down is to say it might have a solution. And I think that there's a lot of investment in not having a solution from many directions. Having said that, yeah, I think that Sure, it's training. And training also gives you courage, because when you're better trained and better equipped, and know what you're talking about and feel convinced and feel committed, then you do gain some courage to face the naysayers in your own community and the negativity in your own community and it's hopeless in your own community. So that kind of training, for all journalists, and what your comment that somebody from Bill-Zaid said about, doing it within the community, within Palestine, is amazing. It's so important. I wish I knew of something going on like that in Israel. So I think that the first thing would be to find out how we can get some good training here, and how we can help people to learn and feel safer with, and more equipped with, and prouder of what they're doing, and not be accused of either collaboration or whitewashing or pinkwashing or whatever they're doing. That would be one. The other would be to expose ourselves to, once we've articulated the problems, is to find the places that we can use the evidence-based that you spoke about, Dina. Let's find them. If we're talking about within each country, within each society, then that's one thing. But if we're talking about the conflict, that's looking at the world. Then let's look at world conflicts, maybe not identical, but face similar issues. And how did they resolve them, and what did it cost, and what failed? We don't have to reinvent wheels, and we don't have to make the same mistakes. That would require funding and help and creating frameworks where we could do that and meet.
Thank you so much, Eetta. I mean, just to also to reiterate your if you want your plea or your advocacy for training, but also ideally to have that training be used to bring both sides together. As you said, the articulation alone of the issues and potentially solutions also to focus on would already be a process that would be helpful, very constructive, and very important. Dina, I want to go next to you also with this question to really see how can we further advance the approach of solutions journalism, in particular in the context of Israel-Palestine.
I agree with what Eetta said. The first step is having good training. The challenge is, so there is that, for example, the Solution Journalism Network has this monthly webinar. So English speakers, there's plenty of resources in English. I would speak, for example, in the Arabic speaking, for the Arabic speaking journalists who do not have access to English, that's a little bit challenging, because the availability of credible resources in Arabic is quite problematic. There are resources in Arabic, but unfortunately, they are not quite accurate. That sometimes I would feel, I'd rather have journalists not checking them than picking up wrong, practices, from these unfortunately not so well written or credible reports. So that's a challenge that we're working on. Personally, in Egab, we try to organize trainings in Arabic to cater for the non-English speakers. But as I said, there's plenty of resources. One suggestion, for example, for Eetta is like, if there's already been stories that have been accepted in the tracker, this means that there are people who know how to produce social journalism. So these could act as champions for this genre in Israel, and then they can train the younger journalists or other peers in their organizations, and this is how you start building this movement. But so the first thing is definitely the training. So you need to train people, but you also need to have very good examples, because there will always be the skeptics. Okay, there are always people who think exactly, oh, this is just positive news. I'm so against this this phrase positive news, with all respect to the publication that has the same name in the UK. But in general, I'm against calling solution journalism, because it's much bigger than this, as explained. But this is the point. If you start getting very good examples out, you start convincing the editors or the skeptics, you start winning some of these from the resistance camp. Also, the one way I like to look to view solution journalism is that it's investigating the solution. So it's not that I am trying to promote a solution. I'm not trying to say, well done for that initiative or organization for doing a great job. No, they claim they solved something, okay? Well, as a journalist, I will investigate this and tell the audience whether they truly managed to do whatever they say they did or not. And that's why, so when you, I find that usually when you frame it that way, people start taking it more seriously because there is this, respect for investigative journalism. And then when you start putting it's another way. So instead of just exposing wrongdoings, you're actually getting to the bottom of whether that organization solved it or not. So this is the second level. So the training, the production of very good stories. The third level, which is, I'm not sure if you are familiar with it, but there is this also trend or approach to journalism called complicating the narratives. Is that we have to, as we exercise also solution journalism and journalism in general, actually, but to try as much as possible to complicate the narrative, i.e. to respect the complexities. So the usual school of journalism, unfortunately, sometimes would oversimplify things, right? They would say, and try to be balanced by getting, having a quote from X who represents, the left, and then having a quote from Y who represents the right. And then they feel, okay, we've done our job. This does not work anymore. And I think this is quite relevant to what the conflict, because this is one of the things. So when, because Eetta's mentioned that the people would be against collaborations, of course, yes, this is true, and this is the reality. But this is the point. This is the beauty of our profession as journalists, because you can present to people the two views. So even if there's a group of people who would be like, no, I wouldn't sit with the other group, okay? You as journalists can bridge this gap by presenting the complexities of the other position. So usually in journalism, we're very obsessed, what's your position? So one of the questions that this approach, complicating the narrative, suggests is that instead of saying, what's your position? Ask, how did you come to have this political view? Because once you've answered this question, people would pause and start thinking, oh, why do I believe in what I believe in? And then you'll find that there's always a personal story. And then you start to see the complexities. And then you might figure out that you both do not disagree. You both believe in, you might believe in the same things, but you come at it from a different perspective. And I'm not saying this will change your position. This will not lead to you suddenly shifting camps, but it will create this understanding for where the other person is coming from and why he's doing. And then you start to build on that understanding. So that's our job as journalists, really. So even if the society will be against it, is that you can do it through journalism by presenting.
I think if I could just jump in, that is, when you're speaking to other journalists, what you're doing is providing the language that the journalists know. And that's, we used to talk about affinity groups, about groups, lawyers meeting with lawyers, and and social workers meeting with social workers, and all of that. But there is some validity to language, ethics, and commitments. I mean, what you describe is something that any journalist could sign on, because that is the commitment, the professional and ethical commitment I made when I chose to be a journalist. You're not asking me to go beyond. In other words, what you're actually demanding I do with these pillars and with the way you present it is to do what I said I want to do as a journalist, what every journalist wants to do. Our responsibility is to inform, not to convince.
How you frame your approach.
Totally, and I think that's really important, to allow journalists to talk to each other. And I want to thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. I really love how that conversation is already, evolving and creating ideas and a very active dialogue. And thank you also, Dina, very much also for your point on, if you want, honoring the complexity of narratives, that this is a very important component, when we are talking about solutions journalism too. And as you said, that pause that the right question or a question asked in a different way or from a different perspective can already generate. Daoud, I would like to ask you too, what are your thoughts on how we can, promote, advance the approach of solutions journalism? And please, your thoughts on that and your ideas.
Daoud, you're muted.
Yes, Daoud, you're muted.
Okay, so what I want to say is that I truly believe in solution journalism, and I use it and I trust it. But I would like to put a few remarks, because I think sometimes we get excited about things and we forget the realities, and hate to kind of throw water on the parade, but there's a problem here. One problem is that we think that journalism can solve all the problems. I've been a journalist for a long time. We cannot solve all the problems. We can cover them, we can report on them, we can help identify the issues, we can articulate the different points of view. But in the bottom and the end of the day, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not going to be resolved by journalists. It can be helped, we can do things, but let's not kid ourselves that if we have good journalism, and I'm talking from experience. I brought the first Sesame Street project to Palestine and Israel, and it didn't succeed. We didn't bring peace, because one of the things that happened when we did the Palestinian-Israeli Sesame Street is that Israelis, they saw Palestinian puppets and they really liked the Palestinians and they changed their point of view. Palestinian children saw the Israeli Muppets, but they opened the door and there was an Israeli soldier slapping their father. Now, what had more effect, the slap or the media? So let's not over zoom, let's not over exaggerate what we as journalists can do. I mean, we all journalists think we can do everything. We have to have a little humility in when we deal with this. Secondly, and this is to Dina, I think it's really wrong to do this comparison between Israelis and Palestinians, the media. The Israeli media is a thriving media, has lots of money, there's so many journalists, there's a lot of advertising, it's a huge industry. The Palestinian media is not an industry. It's a few journalists who are good journalists, most of them working for media that is either paid for by governments or by political parties and so on. So you're comparing apples with oranges. And Dina, I really think that this asymmetry, you should not fall in this trap. It's a weird trap that it's easily to fall in. 45 pieces in Israel and 5 in the West Bank and Gaza. Yeah, I mean, that looks bad. But if you look at the reality, okay, how many original pieces are written in Israel? How many original pieces are written in Palestine media? And you'll see that there's like 5,000 in Israel original pieces, out of which 45 might be solutions. And in Palestine, there's 200, and out of them is 5. So actually, the percentage might not be that different. So if we want to change the reality, we need to really do not just the training, we need to really build up the structure of the Palestinian media so that it can have the gravitas that the Israeli media has in Israeli society. Palestinian media doesn't change society, doesn't change. Israeli media does to a certain degree, but there's a lot of problems in there. So I really think we need to, put a little bit the brakes on thinking that kumbaya, everybody loves each other, we just write good solutions journalism and there will be peace in the Middle East. We have to be careful. What I think can be done and what needs to be done, or solutions journalism really has a really good opportunity, is with the international media. The international media is neither Palestinian nor Israeli, and they don't do solutions journalism. I want them to do solution journalism. They have money, they have the efforts, and they can really give us what the particular possible solutions can be, and that would be a value added. But to get Israeli journalists, Palestinian journalists to give us solution journalism sounds good, and you're UN and everybody's happy and we're talking, but let's be realistic. The situation on the ground is abysmal. Palestinians, you don't like to use the word occupation, but they live under terrible conditions. They don't have the basics for a normal life of freedoms. They have to fight two problems. They have to fight the Israelis and some of the Palestinian leadership. So we have a huge imbalance in the conflict. And I don't want to say, you have an Israeli and you have a Palestinian and you have solutions, and so we're all balanced. Balance, throw it out. Because once it's raining and you say, well, let's ask people, is it raining or is it not raining? No, it's not raining. Yes, it's raining. But we all see it's raining. So we don't need balance when we know it's raining. When we see something that's wrong, whether it's by Israelis or Palestinians or by whoever, we don't need balance. When you see a black and white something, you can discuss it, you can argue why it's done. But let's be realistic. Reality requires, and solution journalism, as Dina said, requires that we have to seek the truth, number one. And we should not sugarcoat it, we should not do anything with it. The truth shall set us free. So first, we need to talk about truth, and then we talk about solutions. And let's not compare Israelis with Palestinians in the media field. It's a wrong end. It's a dead end. By the way, I might have to leave soon. I have a reception with Prince Charles, so I don't think you want me to miss that. If you have other questions for me, I'm happy to answer if you have maybe 5 more minutes.
Thank you so much, Daoud. We would certainly not want you to miss out on that important meeting. And thanks so much also for this reality check that you just provided us with, and also pointing out
a couple of points, if you don't mind. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'd like to hear Dina. Sure.
In a second, Dina. Absolutely, I would like you to respond in a time that Daoud is still with us. Thanks also for pointing out, yes, you point out the asymmetry, if you want, in the media landscape in Israel and Palestine, and say there's also the need for media development, if you want, in Palestine, and that support there is needed. Also from international media, as you said, because the resources are there. So maybe this is also an important, call and suggestion coming out of this. But Dina, I want to give you the opportunity to respond. So please come in before Daoud has to leave us.
Of course, we don't want him to miss the reception. So first, the solution journalism tracker figures are not from Palestinian Israel. That's from all media. And we actually, guess what? The reports about Palestine were from foreign media, BBC, mainly. Okay. New York Times. So yes. So when I'm citing the figures,
accepted.
Wow, the foreign media, exactly how it's being portrayed. That because we usually portray Palestinians as victims, or when we're speaking about Hamas,
that's even more telling what you just said.
Exactly. So this is the point. So I just wanted to clarify this. The other thing that's very important to point out is that definitely no one is saying that there is a huge imbalance in everything. Let's be. There is a much powerful side and a less. And I think this is one of the problems with this conflict. Really, is that it's not between two equally powerful sides. There is a huge imbalance. Okay, and yeah, the elephant in the room is the occupation, definitely. But let's be. This is the way where you're speaking about journalism. Let's be realistic. Yes, I love this. So definitely, I'm not saying that we will solve everything. But at the same time, we as journalists need to focus on every profession, really need to focus on what change they can do in their field. I can't solve the world's problems, but I can try to solve journalism's problems. And I can try to through my profession, to make it slightly better. I'm not saying to solve it, but at least make some steps. And that's by, okay, one of the things we have to admit, okay, we have a conflict. We have people who have this conflict been going for what, more than 70 years, decades. People have been born and maybe died during this conflict. This is a reality, and definitely, and I think, and I hope that the Israeli side as well realize that it has to come to an end. Like we have really, it's about time. But if we're speaking that Israel is a democratic society and there are elections and journal, as you said, very strong and powerful journals, then we need to work through the journalists in both countries, need to create that space to show through solution journalism by the solutions and show the way forward. And okay. This is a way to hold officials accountable, because officials might come up and say, oh, it's very complicated, right? We can't solve it. But by showing them examples, no, this has been solved before. And also for the people, because you also have to start creating like both sides, they not see each other. They don't understand. By trying to portray, to explain to the world that no, Palestinians are not just the, what you see on TV.
Terrorists.
More complicated than this. So this helps.
Humanizing. You're humanizing the Palestinians.
Of
You're
course.
saying.
And the other, yes.
Absolutely.
I think it's also important to even go beyond the humanizing, because there's something almost there's something almost paternalistic in that. But first, I just want to say, Daoud, I'm not denying the existence of the occupation at all, please, or the imbalance. And of course, as the Israeli Jew here, I'm not unaware of my privileged position in this conflict and the imbalance of power. All I meant was that doesn't lead to solutions and solutions journalism, because I don't know what to do with that. It has to be broken down into its components in order to act on it. That I didn't want in any way to be heard as being disrespectful to the imbalance of power.
No, I never said that. No.
Okay, no, I felt the need.
I think what we see a lot is, and I used to hear a lot of the word peace journalism, and I didn't like that. No. Because peace journalism forces you to lie and cover up so that everything is peaceful. I don't like peace journalism, but solution journalism is something that is appropriate, and we can find ways to apply it. Israelis, Palestinians, internationals, and the UN should, come in and support that. The problem is the whole media business has been devastated by the Googles and by the Amazons. We haven't talked about that, but they have changed the whole business cycle, business model, and we need to use this fact that the business model has been lost to say, okay, let's find ways to support media rather than through advertising, but through other means. So I'm happy that I participated in this. I hope that everything's okay. Thank you so much for inviting me, and goodbye.
Bye,
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot, Daoud. And I'm so glad that Eetta and Dina, we can continue our conversation, and what a spirited conversation it is, and impassioned, I almost want to say. So I'm sure of the journalists who are listening into this would want to learn more about, tools available, resources available, and both of you have mentioned and highlighted the need for training. Dina, you also already mentioned some resources that are available on your site, but maybe either of you, if you could, we've had somebody from the audience from Birzeit University already there, a great resource, obviously a university that is already focusing on that. From either of you, for the journalists who are listening in, and who will listen and tune in to the recording of this, what are your tips? Where do you go? What to learn more and to train on solutions journalism?
I just want to pick up on one thing, because you're probably, Dina, much more familiar than I, but I think that one of the things, again, is that to create a space where we learn from each other is crucial to changing the impression we have. I mean, the presentation of victims, often, Palestinians as victims, often among most people, in most cases, creates almost a compassion fatigue. Like if all you are is victims, what more do you want from me? I don't have anything to help you, is what a reader will say. So one important thing is not just to present the victims, not that I don't want to see empathy, but imagine how different it is when you see people with agency, people with abilities, people, I'd like to know about some of the problems that, obviously I'm speaking from my own point of view, but my daughter is a teacher. I'd love to know how Palestinians deal with some of the difficulties that come up in a classroom that are common. They could be status issues. I don't know, I'm not an educator, but it would be fascinating to me. And I think it really matters to see Palestinians as, just as I think it's important for Palestinians to see, particularly Jewish Israelis, but all Israelis, as compassionate or able to understand. It's important for us to see agency, capacity, all those kinds of things. The resource that I might want to just point out here is that there is something, it's small, but I find it very useful, is 0202, which is, 02 is the area code in Jerusalem in Israel. And it would be, they translate from each other's media. You spoke about the difficulty of knowing English. Very few Israelis are capable of reading, Israeli Jews, that is, obviously Israeli Palestinians, but very few Israeli Jews are capable of reading anything in Arabic, including a sign. Even fewer have any ability to hear something on the radio or something. So translating it into your language. Similarly, while Palestinians as the minority probably know Hebrew better than Israelis know Arabic, their ability to deal with the high level of a newspaper Hebrew and written is also going to be very limited. So just the fact that 0202 translates for each other is already a resource for people who have, it also says, just because we have different languages doesn't mean that we're not facing as people, as individuals, as women, similar issues. Those are really crucial things to look at. That's a resource I think people should be aware of and might be able to use.
Thanks so much. Thanks a lot for that, Eetta. Very, very concrete. 0202, a network that provides translations of media coverage of articles into Arabic and also back into Hebrew, right?
From Arabic to Hebrew and Hebrew to Arabic.
So either
on
way.
the assumption that we
ways.
can't read each other's papers.
Yeah, so either way, so very an important resource. And Dina, now maybe also to you, like you're listening in, imagine you're a journalist, you listen to this, where are the training resources, the courses, the books, the manuals, the in short, where's the trove of tools that journalists can tap into to familiarize themselves more with the approach of solutions journalism?
Yes, definitely. So if you're an English speaker, so the Solution Journalism Network webinar, and they have a Facebook group, which is very useful to put your, my advice to any journalist really is always belong to a community, networking. So this is a great way to network, is putting yourself in that Facebook group and sign up to their newsletters. Sometimes there are opportunities. Also, there's the Constructive Institute in Denmark, which is leading the constructive journalism, which is very similar to solution journalism, but more comprehensive. And also Deutsche Welle Academy is having this great program focused on constructive journalism. They're having a fellowship. I know it's coming to an end in January, but they're planning to have more, hopefully. I mean, this was the plan. And they're actually having webinars. So tomorrow, for example, we're having a webinar that I'm moderating about how to cover climate change from a solution journalism lens. You know, climate change is the big topic now and a very important topic. So just, you know, follow them as well and follow these. So this is if you are an English speaker, you have a lot of, starting with these 3 resources will get you covered, and from there you can discover more. If not, I would say if you're an Arabic speaker, I would say sign up to the IJNet Arabic newsletter and the website. Check that they do have some resources in Arabic about solution journalism, and I know that there are plans in collaboration with Solution Journalism Network to have some examples of solution journalism stories in Arabic. It's not live yet, but hopefully soon. So just stay tuned to this. But also, I don't want to be promoting what we do as Egab, but I'll just say one line. Don't mind. I want to be using the platform. So because at Egab, what we do really, we don't publish ourselves. So what we do is that we empower local journalists from across the Middle East and Africa to publish solution journalism stories about their own communities in international media. So we're trying to balance it. So in a way, So by joining our network, you're learning because we provide, but our approach is focused on the job training. So instead of just giving you a workshop and you're off you go on your own, we're trying to enable you by practicing whatever you learn and getting published. So building your CV to the capacity building, because I know Daoud is not, when he spoke about how the media situation in Palestine. Actually, I'm a big believer that you start fixing the media situation in a country by building the capacity of journalists, because media is made out of journalists, right? So you don't need, I know sometimes we look at media, oh, business, it needs a lot of money, but I have to say, I started Egab 1 year ago on my own, my own money, and I'm not rich, I'm okay. But this is the point, you really, if you have enough knowledge and skills in the digital world that we're living in with the internet and everything, you really don't, you can start. Yes, it gets trickier to sustain, but hopefully once you can show evidence that your approach is working, you can secure some funding and et cetera, and you get the ball rolling. But this is the point, if you focus on building the capacity of journalists themselves, then hopefully, I'm not saying in the short term, but the medium term, long term, you start improving the status of media, because media is made, anything is made of people. We are the ones who make the good, articles, websites, media. So if you have good calibers, then you can hope to fix the media situation in your country. I just wanted to say this because I usually in media discussions, the focus on the laws, the policy, and this is very important. They are very important discussions. But even if you have the best laws and policies in the world and you don't have good journalists, you'll end up having very bad quality or misinformation, and people will not just read, because you don't want to just write or produce journalism for no one to consume it, right? So I think that's why I think I'm a big believer in working in parallel. So let's work on all tracks while people are pushing to making the laws better, the policies better. We practitioners, because I'm not a policymaker, I'm a journalist, let's try to work on building the capacity of local journalists in our own communities.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that is, Dina, that's so important, really, this on-the-job training, as you said, learning by doing, and therefore building the capacity of Palestinian media, which is also, of course, exactly what Daoud pointed out, is so badly needed, is really important, but also very interesting, your emphasis on joining a network and also pointing out a number of networks that exist already, whether that's the Solutions Journalism Network or the Constructive Journalism Network in Denmark, and also what AGNet is doing. So here are resources that are hopefully growing, along with the on-the-job training that organizations like you in particular are offering. Eetta, I would like to ask you on this. I mean, do you see you've been a lecturer at university. Do you see a role for academia here as well, like a growing role for academia in this field?
I think that, are you referring to schools,
universities? Yeah.
Or because I think one of the places would be, first I would look at the social sciences, and saying what the disconnect between the social sciences, especially social psychology and anthropology and sociology and journalism, when we have so much to learn from each other, is quite striking and unfortunate at a minimum. So one is to enable us to learn from each other. There are theories, there are, there's the old Kurt Weill said that there's nothing as useful as a good theory, that we could broaden our own knowledge, number one. I think in terms of journalism, it's certainly what Dina said, one of the places that journalists are trained, not solely, but one of the places they're trained is schools of journalism. And if schools of journalism are not going to be teaching how to deal with reality and how to deal with complexities and how to deal with what the term, the challenges you face as an individual. I'd also point out that maybe not it's academia per se, but one of the problems we have now is so many journalists, especially young ones, are freelancers. I mean, the three of us are sitting and I don't even know where all of us are located. So kids very young are sitting somewhere writing stories. They have but they're missing, even if they get some training, or they're missing mentoring. They're missing the informal mentoring that comes from, around the coffee clutch when you want to say, I'm stuck. And somebody, not necessarily more experienced than you, but somebody else says, here, let's think this. That doesn't exist for some of these young people. So one of the things that, if not the universities, other organizations could be doing is creating forums for young journalists to come and talk to each other. They don't have where to be. I didn't train in journalism. I trained in psychiatric social work and made a switch to this field. I was very fortunate. I worked with people who taught me, who mentored me, who allowed me to write a story that I cringe when I think of some of the things I wrote at the beginning of my career. And I was not that young. I didn't know and could critique. I think it is the role of academia, certainly as academia goes out, the whole concept of the connection between academia and the community, to create forums, and hopefully in person as the world heals, when that will happen. Certainly online for now, and Zoom is an excellent tool, as we're seeing, where younger trainees can come and bring their questions, where they can say, I'm stuck, where they can bring their ethical issues, where they can gain the confidence and belief in themselves and in the profession. I've noticed among young people that they don't call themselves journalists, they call themselves writers, as though that were some sort of a generic term. Well, I'm not even sure what that means. Journalism has a code of ethics. It's a profession, it's a discipline, it has ethics, it has morality, it has tools, it has everything that a profession has. That's not being a writer, it's being a journalist. So I can't emphasize enough how important I think it is to create these forums where younger people will be trained, leading into what Dina said, so that when they come to get a job, and they are getting jobs, they're getting freelance jobs, making contributions, they don't really know what to do yet. Let's help them out.
Right. And again, if you want to, going back to what Dina had said before, another network that you are, if you want, also advocating for, but also very interesting what you said, of course, the link to social sciences when we're talking about solutions journalism, and for journalism schools to take this up, and to train their people so that they graduate with that knowledge. In concluding, I would like to discuss a little bit some criticism that has come up on solutions journalism already. And here, we have these, both of you and also Daoud, very engaged, very impassioned, and if you want, advocates for the approach of solutions journalism. But I want to quote David Bornstein of the Solutions Journalism Network, who has said, the biggest potential corruption of solutions journalism is if it devolves into a kind of good news or feel-good product rather than a source of problem-solving knowledge, grounded in rigorous critical reporting. And on the other hand, we've heard critical voices that say solutions journalism runs the risk of potential bias and advocacy instead of, neutral reporting. And Dina, you sort of touched on some of these elements already initially, but please, if you want to respond to both these critiques, if you want, and what do you say to that?
Yeah, I think these critiques are valid, and when this happens, that's not solution journalism. We actually they're called we call them sojo imposters. So because we say journalism is sojo, so they're imposters. They're trying to be solution journalism, they're not. So yes, exactly. I mean, this happens and I see it a lot because the way we work is that I receive pitches from local journalists and then we help them, sell it to to international media. So many of the pitches we get received is that exactly that, like this woman who defied all odds and succeeded in, doing X, Y, Z, which is great for her, good for her. But this is not solution journalism. The solution journalism has to be a response to a problem that's experienced by a group of people, a community, a society, and there has to be evidence, again, going through the 4 pillars. It's not just about that amazing person who did this amazing thing. And I mean, there are some programs that run such stories. I think CNN Heroes does this, which is great. But you just call them, that it's exactly an inspiring individual story. It's not solution journalism. So it's just about labeling, really. But I think this is the problem why it's very important to get solution journalism right. And that's why I'm very critical about the Arabic material being circulated as training material for solution journalism, because some of them get it completely wrong. And for me, I'd rather have no material in Arabic than having wrong material, because it's difficult to correct, wrong learning. I'd rather teach someone, a blank sheet who haven't learned anything about solution journalism than trying to convince them, okay, forget what all you learned. So I think that's the problem, is that when people who never got well trained in solution journalism, they just heard of it, okay? So they hear the term and they start coming to conclusions in their own mind that, oh, this must mean that I will propose a solution, or, oh, this might mean that this person found a solution for himself. And then they start producing things and promoting it as solution journalism. And then editors who are very, who believe in the value of journalism and, holding officials to account and all this, get really, upset with this, because they think exactly that we are disrespecting journalism. And that's why we go back to the importance of having credible resources, and hopefully we can have them in all languages. I mean, at the moment there are, and also most of the examples, Daoud did mention, 43 and 5, that's not big compared to the world. Yes, it's true. If you look at the solution journalism produced from the Western countries, it's huge compared to what's coming from our region, but we need to start fixing this. So yes, I hope that we can start having more. I mean, I'm trying to do it through Egab, and I hope more people try to do it and tune in. And I hope that also it start getting picked up in universities and journalism schools, at least even an intro to solution journalism. So just people would graduate knowing that there is such a genre, and then if they are interested in consolidating their knowledge, they can go ahead and start enrolling in trainings and workshops and etc.
Thanks so much, Dina, and thanks really for reminding us exactly that solutions journalism is rigorous evidence-based journalism, as you said at the outset. That's the first pillar of solutions journalism, and very important to always keep in mind, and therefore also that the training materials need to be meeting that standard, if you want. Eetta, do you have some final thoughts also on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think not everything is solutions journalism, certainly, but not everything needs to be. There is a place for opinion. There is a place for inspiration. And that's what you said, Dina. I mean, there isn't anything inherently wrong with saying something, telling me about somebody who overcame their limitations. And there's nothing wrong with an op-ed if it's well written and well reasoned. There is room for everything. And no, we should never think that our job is to be cheerleaders. Our job is to inform the public, and we have a particular way to do that. We have a set, again, ethics, in the case of solutions journalism, pillars that relate to those ethics as well as to the techniques. Those of us who want to commit to that, yeah, then that is what we are doing, and that is definitely journalism. It's not feel-good stuff. Having said that, you mentioned the issue of advocacy. We won't have time to go into that. I think it is very complicated, but I committed to informing. My advocacy is to enabling people to know as much as I, in my small way, in the fields that I cover, civil society, to make informed decisions in their social and political decision-making. That advocacy? Well, at the minimum level, it's advocacy for democracy. because I'm encouraging people to participate in the democratic process by providing them with information. That's my little contribution. I'm not out there to get out the vote. But would I write it? But is it advocacy to write a story about voter suppression? Yes, it's advocacy because there are things we all believe. I think people should have the right to vote in democratic societies. So I don't want to back away from the fact that we are saying things, and let's be proud of them. As journalists, as people participating in the world, in this state, that we are promoting ideas of making people's lives better in many ways, and in as many ways as we can attend to, we being the broad profession. And that's good. And we can be proud of that, not back away from it. So yeah, we are advocates in some way. We're advocates for solutions. We're not advocates for keeping things bad. We're advocates for improving people's lives. And I'm proud to say that. I only hope I hold to it, and we all hold to it as often as we can.
Well, thanks so much, Eetta. I think that's a great way to conclude our conversation today, and maybe a topic that we can delve into at another point in time. But for now, I really want to thank both of you, Dina, Eetta, and of course also Daoud, who had to leave us a little earlier, for this really engaging and engaged conversation. I want to thank our audience. This brings our media seminar on peace in the Middle East in 2021 to an end. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And again, thank you so much to our speakers. Bye-bye.
Thank you.